And welcome to the show. Well, we start off today talking about a very special organization. The Center for Community Alternatives, better known as CCA, promotes reintegrative justice and reduced reliance on incarceration through advocacy services, as well as public policy development in pursuit of civil as well as human rights. They provide direct services to communities in New York City, as well as Syracuse and Rochester, engaging approximately 2,500 youth and adults annually. And in an average year, CCA successfully diverts over 100 adults and juveniles from costly incarceration, saving New York State millions of dollars, and also their work reduces the collateral consequences of incarceration. Joining us now to share more details is the Director for Community Alternatives for the Center for Community Alternatives, a New York statewide organizer, Marvin Mayfield. And Marvin, good to have you here with us on the Social Justice Forums.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Great to be here today.
It's great to have you and have this conversation because one of the issues that we talk about in social justice, of course, is that of the criminal justice system and criminal justice reform. We look and we know that incarceration has been a tool that has been weaponized, particularly against communities of color. But in the work that you do, you're providing alternatives to incarceration. So share with us a little bit about the work at CCA.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to describe what we're doing and the importance of it in our community. Well, we know that Black and brown people in our communities have been disproportionately affected by incarceration and mass incarceration and criminality, the criminalization of poverty. CCA and our partner members and organizations have been tirelessly fighting for criminal justice reform in the form of bail reform, and which would reduce the number and the reliance of our criminal justice system on putting people in jails when they cannot afford to pay a bail. We've all heard about the story of Khalif Browder and how long he spent 3 years inside of Rikers Island, enduring every type of horror that a person could think of for 3 years, to the point where he took his own life. We have been tirelessly fighting for the reduction in the population of people who have been incarcerated pre-trial. So that's where bail reform came in, and we had a very successful campaign in reducing that number. In January 2020, the New York State Legislature voted in to eliminate the reliance on bail for most most nonviolent felony convictions and almost all of the misdemeanor charges, which reduced the number of people incarcerated in jails to the tune of nearly 40%. That meant thousands of people across New York State were no longer subject to losing their homes, losing their jobs, having their children put into a foster care system like that. So what we're focusing on now is the natural extension of that campaign, which would reduce the number of people who are in New York State prisons. As you know, when you go into jails is like a pre-trial system. So a person has not been convicted of anything at that point. Now, when we're trying to reduce the number of people who have been sentenced to a time in New York State, we need to reduce those numbers as well. And that was our campaign for sentencing and decarceration that we're focusing on now.
So talk to us about dealing with some of the disparities, because obviously we know that when it comes to incarceration, a lot of people in communities of color are always on the short end of the stick. I know that you guys do great work in terms of really trying to deal with that and then some.
Well, like I said, mass incarceration has affected our communities disproportionately. Black and brown people have become the commodity in the prison industrial complex. And our mission at CCA is to reduce the reliance as a first response to the social ills, the social injustice that has been inflicted upon us as a people. So, in addition to the sentencing and decarceration aspects of our work, we also have a plethora of initiatives that we're working on, such as to end solitary confinement, which has been deemed as cruel and unusual punishment by the United Nations. But here in New York State, we're relying on that particular horror disproportionately affecting Black and brown people. Effectively, the sentencing laws and statutes in New York State allow for life sentences and sentences that are indeterminate, where the parole board has the ability to deny parole again and again and again. If, for instance, a person may be sentenced to 5 to 10 or 5 to 15 and an indeterminate sentence, and the parole board will hit that person every 2 years, extending their incarceration to the tune of 20, 30, even 40 years after a person has been eligible for parole for maybe 10 or 20 years. So those are some of the initiatives that we're working on.
It took a long time to get bail reform right here in the state of New York. How accommodating have been the elected officials now, given the fact that, you know, these issues are continuing to rise? We're seeing more and more national spotlight on them. Are we seeing a swing or a changing of the guard?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. With the recent elections, the Senate and the Assembly in New York State are enjoying a supermajority. Right now, that means that some of the pitfalls, some of the hurdles, and some of the blockages that we've had, that we've experienced dealing with bail reform and other campaigns, may not be as serious or harmful to us, because now with the supermajority, we can actually push some progressive legislation forward. In the past, it's been difficult, of course, but the legislature, we have had many people in the Assembly, many members of the Senate who have been instrumental in helping us push these agendas forward. Without their support, without their leadership, we would not have been where we have made it to. But their input is basically contingent upon their constituency. Well, as we know that elected officials are elected, and it's their constituency that put them in office, and we as on the ground organizers and advocates, we fight to mobilize people who are on the ground, people who have been directly impacted by these oppressive laws in New York State, and have empowered them to use their voices to encourage our legislatures to push our agenda forward. Now we can enjoy, like I said, a supermajority in the Senate and in the Assembly, where we intend to push our bills forward. Without, like I said, without their input, we don't go any further.
Right. I want to talk about some things we're dealing with here in New York, particularly. I want to talk about fines and fees, because when you deal with the court system, you can, whether it's traffic court, regular court, you can find some fines and fees that are actually associated, and those fees can be almost more than the infraction itself. I mean, I'm not lying. I mean, I've seen it. I've been a victim of it. Talk to us about how you're approaching this, because I know that there's some work that you're doing in regards to fines and fees.
Right. With fines and fees, see, New York State has been benefiting from charging people these outrageous fees for, let's say, for tickets, for fines, for traffic tickets, things like that. But not only those, these fines also go into courts. When a person is convicted or even let's say charged with an offense, there's a court fee that's associated with that. And sometimes these court fees go for hundreds and hundreds of dollars for people who are least able to pay these fines. And when a person is, let's say, subsequently on probation or parole, they're burdened with these fees. Let's say a person comes out and is not employed, doesn't have a job, doesn't have any real means of support. As we know, when a person leaves prison, even if they've been there for 10 or 20 years, the New York State Department of Corrections discharges them with $40 and a released inmate ID. They are tacking on a probation fee that that has to be paid monthly. And if they don't pay this, they are subject to arrest, they are subject to violations and things like that. So we're working toward eliminating these fines and fees across the state regarding licensing. What a person at this point in time, if a person can't pay fines, their license has been revoked or suspended, causing them not to be able to work or to travel to get where they need to go. These are some of the initiatives we're working on as relates to fines and fees.
Yeah. Can you please give our viewers a little bit more insight into what is known as discovery reform? How do you explain that?
Okay, well, discovery itself is part of the pretrial legislation that we were fighting for. Within pretrial legislation, there were three aspects of it. One was the bail reform itself to eliminate the cash bail, and one
Right.
was for a speedy trial to be instituted so that a person doesn't languish in prison year after year waiting for their trial to be adjudicated. And the third was the discovery aspect of it. Now, discovery means simply that the evidence that is brought from the prosecution against a defendant. Now, this discovery typically in New York State, up until the discovery reform, was just horrendous. The prosecution had the responsibility to release this information to the defense, to the defendant and his attorneys, but would typically just languish and wait and delay it without ever supplying this discovery. So a person was pretty much in the dark about their case, and the prosecution used this tactic as a way of delaying the process and coercing guilty pleas out of people without giving them the benefit of the knowledge. With the reforms that went into effect in January 2020, the prosecution had the responsibility now to present this evidence to the defense within a 15-day period. Now, this was revolutionary in New York State prosecution. So now the defendant has the right and the advantage of being informed about the charges against them before they make any decisions about taking any pleas.
So for people who want to know a little bit more about CCA and the work that you guys do, talk about your clients and the clients that you serve. We talked in the intro, not only in New York City, but you've got Rochester, you got Syracuse as well.
Right. Well informed. Right. We have offices in New York City. Our main offices in Brooklyn, in New York City, and in Rochester, and in Syracuse. And our clientele are people who have been affected or accused of charges or offenses within New York State, and they range from youth divisions, I think from the age of 15 on to 19, and then to adults, and helping them with re-entry services and things like that. So we work with them and try to find alternatives to such as drug treatment programs, work programs, and internships that we are sponsoring at this point in time. So our clientele are mainly Black and brown people in our communities who have been affected by mass incarceration and the criminal justice system as a whole. And it is our responsibility to try to find alternatives that they won't have to go, that the system won't put them inside a jail or a cell, or as we say, a cage. We promote building communities, not cages for our clients.
Yeah. And as we start our sights on 2021, I know there's some legislation that's on the table, some things that you're actually looking at. One of the things that we should be paying attention to as we get into the new year, and what are you excited in terms of possibly seeing?
Well, I'm pretty excited about a campaign that we call the Justice Roadmap. And the Justice Roadmap is a campaign that encompasses a variety of bills that will promote decarceration and fairness and oppression in New York State. And like I said, some of those campaigns some of those initiatives are to halt solitary confinement, to have to address elder parole, where people are aging in prison and have been denied parole repeatedly, and fair and timely parole, which would ensure that a person that has completed 15 years has the opportunity to see a parole board rather than just be pushed aside year after year after year. Also, we have our bills that's like walking while trans that we're supporting, where the New York City police have been harassing mainly Black and brown trans women for just being who they are and being approached and arrested and accosted and harassed. Those are some of the things that I'm pretty excited about in 2021, and we're continuing to push through the issues that have seemed to have fallen on the back burner last year. So we're promoting that bill of legislation through the Justice Roadmap, which is going to be launched on the actually tomorrow is the big launch, and we're having it in 5 different locations in New York State, where we are having our local legislators, our assembly members who are adamant about pushing these bills forward.
So for people who want more information, how they go about being connected to you?
Well, you can go to our website, which is communityalternatives.org, and you can just log on and find out what we're doing. And there's a page where you can ask questions, get numbers, get information, and find out who we are.
Marvin Mayfield, New York Statewide organizer for Center for Community Alternatives, better known as CCA. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Social Justice Forums, and keep up the good fight.
It's been my pleasure, and I ask for those of you who want to get involved, call our legislators, let them know that we are not going to forget the people who have been incarcerated, and mass incarceration is going to be a thing of the past if we stick together.
All right, Marvin Mayfield, our guest here on the Social Justice Forums. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our next guest coming up right after this.